Welcome to this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. We're talking about managing upwards and working effectively with senior stakeholders. You could also read across and say, well, that's with clients, that's with business partners, customers. Yeah, it's basically all different types of stakeholders. And let's call them senior because for a lot of us, we have important people that we work for and work with. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, managing upwards and becoming particularly relevant and highly valuable to these individuals so that we can get a win-win. That is really what we're after. My name's Neil Wilkins, and I'm going to be hosting this Cambridge Marketing College fortnightly series webinar for you here this morning. So what are we talking about here? We're looking at how to communicate clearly, effectively manage expectations, and build productive relationships with senior colleagues or stakeholders more generally. That's where we're looking here. So I'd like you to think about, just to reflect as we get started in this, reflect on which senior stakeholder relationship currently feels for you the easiest. In other words, who are you getting on with in a position of seniority and why? And who actually feels hardest when you're actually trying to communicate with them, build a relationship with them, support them? And why does that feel hard? So, actually understanding that there are many different types of senior stakeholders and your relationships with them may well be very different. Of course, we're talking about human relationships and communication here. So there are many different subtleties and little nuances between every single relationship that we have as humans. So I'd like you to reflect on which ones feel easiest and can you figure out why, and which ones feel maybe a little more tricky and why is that too? We'll go into this as we go through this detail. So why does this actually matter? Well, basically, if you're in any kind of communications role, be it PR, marketing, content creation, or you're a more generalist business professional, all of this stuff rarely works in isolation. And most of what you do in your role involves influencing people. And these people, these individuals, will undoubtedly have different priorities, different views of success, different time pressures. They're probably working to a subtly different agenda or maybe something completely different. Now, a lot of the research and a lot of the kind of more formal official guidance will say that if you can start to build a productive, and this bit's key, a mutually beneficial relationship with these individuals, your line manager, your boss, maybe somebody even more senior, through understanding their priorities, through understanding how and what they need, and then balancing those needs with your own, then you are on the road to success. So managing upwards is not, as some people have described it, politics in a grubby suit. It is actually part of doing your job well. It's part of actually enjoying what you do. You don't want to be feeling subservient to anybody. That's not going to serve you at all. It's not going to feel good. But actually working with somebody who is in a position of seniority to you is something that requires careful crafting. But we are always here looking for a win-win. This is not you being subservient to anybody. It's about you gaining value from the relationship and ensuring the other person does too. And we're going to show you some tips and tricks and techniques for doing this as we go through this today. So the aims of this session, by the end of this, you will hopefully understand what managing upwards actually means and actually involves. Okay, there are a lot of misconceptions here about what this is about. And you'll also be able to recognize what senior stakeholders actually care about in reality. And it is very likely not going to be the things that you care about. Well, it might be in some cases, but in a lot of cases, they are working to a completely different agenda. Their view of the world is different. So let's recognize why it's different and how you can respond and react to it. We're going to look at communicating in a clearer, more useful way. Obviously, that would be useful, wouldn't it? And helpful. And also managing expectations before problems grow. And this is all about preempting the things that might prove to be a little bit of a hurdle or a little bit of a challenge before you actually reach those. And ultimately, of course, it is about building trust and credibility and better working relationships as you form these relationships and partnerships going forward. So let's begin with a bit of a definition. I always try and do this so that we can kind of set the scene so you understand what I'm thinking we're going to be talking about here. So, managing upwards, what does it really mean? Well, it means working intentionally with people above you in the hierarchy, because most of us have either clients who, in theory, are above us because they're really important and we're serving them, or in a structure within a business or within a team or an organization. This is working intentionally. That's key with people above you so that expectations, priorities, communication, and decisions are clearer. Clearer for you, but also clearer for them. So the goal here is not to please senior stakeholders blindly. It's not about saying yes every time you're asked to do something. The goal here is to work proactively and productively with them. So that's a really important, I guess, difference to how most people would consider working with somebody who is senior to them. Often we feel almost trained and obliged to say yes, almost to kind of do as we are told, as we're being brought up as young children. We're often kind of by our parents sort of told, yeah, this is the way the world works. This is what you have to do. Please follow the rules. And this is often how we kind of see and perceive working with somebody in a senior position when we come into working in our careers. And of course, if we're serving in maybe a B2B sense, others and clients, then often that is how we feel, subservient to the people paying the money. And this is not really very helpful. The goal is to work with these individuals. They're just humans like we are, and working with them productively and proactively. So we need to be taking a little bit of accountability for this relationship and how we are going to kind of use it to create value for everybody. That's ultimately what we're doing. So let's kind of anchor this kind of in a solid foundation. The idea here is to show up courageously and speak up and skillfully to influence others to gain buy-in. Okay. This is not just about managing people upwards and keeping them informed. It's also about influencing them, challenging constructively if it's appropriate. Sometimes just saying yes is the right answer, but more often than not, it is about challenging constructively. And we'll figure out how you can do that because that can often feel quite awkward, I guess, particularly if there are relationships that maybe are a little bit strained or maybe you've been told to do things. And it's an opportunity to actually challenge constructively. But it's also about helping everybody to make better decisions. Okay, that's the key here. It's about supporting the right decision and the most value that you can get out of the activity or the project or the task that you've been given. And that if that does involve challenging, because there is a better way of doing it, or there is a better way of kind of I guess, kind of rolling this out or maybe using different people to support you, then that is something that's your responsibility to bring back into the relationship or into the conversation. Blindly saying yes to everything is not the answer. Okay, that is not managing upwards and working effectively with senior stakeholders. That is not what it's about. So it's not just about saying yes, but what we need to do is figure out, okay, if we're going to challenge, if we're going to be constructive, if we're going to develop a relationship, how does that work? Because it sounds like it's a little bit risky, sounds like it's kind of a little bit kind of, I'm not sure I can do that. And it is without the tools and the techniques that you're going to be practicing from this point onwards. So let's get the first of the little kind of approaches or the models that you can start to think about here. The first one is something called the power interest grid. Now, this one's really, really good because it helps you to classify your stakeholders, be they senior management, your line manager, a customer, whoever it is, by the power and interest that they hold. So if they have say high power, but very, very low interest, then obviously what you're going to be doing is communicating with them differently to somebody who's got relatively low power, but very high interest. So that person's going to want a lot of detail, probably, but the person with high power but low interest is probably just going to want a little soundbite, a little snapshot of what's going on. So not every senior stakeholder needs the same type of update or the same level of detail or even the same conversation. So not every senior stakeholder here is coming to you with the same level of interest, the same level of power, or the same level of relationship need from you. So not everyone is the same. Okay, so we are now talking about senior stakeholders, plural, and we're going to start to work with them maybe in a slightly different way. And just because they shout the loudest, just because they've got the charisma, just because they seem to be more important than others, does not necessarily mean that is the truth. Okay, so what we're looking at here is trying to figure out, okay, where do they sit in my almost league table of importance? And it's their level of power and it's their level of interest. So there is a grid. I mean, imagine putting those stakeholders into a grid where on one axis you've got level of power, then the other axis you've got level of interest, and then you kind of plot where these stakeholders are. It's not going to give you a final answer necessarily of what you are going to do, but it's going to give you an opportunity to just consider them as different. So these stakeholders will have a different kind of influence on how you then interact with them. And of course, the reality here, when you start to look at it in this level of detail, is that they have different kinds of priorities. Some will have strong, time priorities. They'll have very limited time to be interacting with you. Some will be viewing the work that you do as high or low risk. Some will have kind of quite ambiguous needs or challenges. And some will have competing stakeholder pressures. So they're all looking at this and all looking at you and all having a relationship with you at a different level of importance from their perspective. So, what we need to be doing is kind of listening really to them, defining their goals clearly, understanding kind of what it is that they want, what matters to them, what kind of risk profile are they willing to accept, what kinds of decisions are we going to be supporting from them, and kind of how best really to communicate with them. Is it simple and kind of proactive? Is it just little sound bites? Or is it no, actually, what they want and need is to go deeper than the other stakeholder over there. So what we're doing here is starting to build this kind of stakeholder map. And you might have heard that phrase, or you might be studying that phrase at the moment and trying to figure out who are my stakeholders? And particularly if they are more senior than you are, then this becomes really, really important because, of course, they are very influential over the kinds of work or projects that you get, and also things like your career progression, or if you're serving a customer or a client, actually how, likely it is that they and others like them are going to be buying from your business into the future. So what we're looking to do here is really form alignment. And this is the kind of clear, kind of key starting point as we're building these kind of foundations in successful stakeholder engagement here. So we need to get clear on what success looks like, what matters most, and where time and energy should go. So useful kind of alignment questions here as we start to think about these stakeholders and start to get into conversation and really listen to them. It isn't just about, almost just plotting and then saying, oh, well, this is kind of an artificial exercise. It's about actually aligning the questions that you need answered so that you can really understand you actually are working with reality. And so you do need to listen here rather than just certainly react or respond. So some useful alignment questions are, what does success look like here? Mutually beneficial success, so it's a win-win. What matters most to you on this project could be a question that you're going to ask the stakeholder. What is it that they're kind of, showing interest in, and actually what is it that's important to them? Also, what do you most want to avoid? And this would be a question that you really want to ask your line manager, particularly. And how would you like updates? Again, not making the assumption they want the monthly report in the same old way it's always been delivered. Maybe they want something reported, maybe little daily sound bites of what's going on and the progress. Or maybe if they're not looking to micromanage this, maybe it is just keep me informed when something significant happens, and I'd like you to send it to me by email. Or send me a dashboard every day because I want to check in with this. It's a really important project to me because I've got other stuff happening where this project can actually feed in. Now, you might not know that without asking the question. So find out what is important to them. This is about basic relationship building. We're really talking about that right here now. And also asking about, if there are problems, when do you want them escalated? Because no project, no campaign, no activity is ever going to be perfectly smooth. So at what level would you like to know if there's an issue? Or can I just deal with it and then tell you I've done it? Because some people will want to know that, oh, if this thing is not working perfectly, I want you to flag it to me. But other people will say, no, 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 you just deal with it. And if it becomes really tricky, like we go beyond this amount of spend, or, there is a time delay of over a week or whatever it is. And again, you've got to ask them because they will have a threshold beyond which they need to feel like they're involved. But up to that point, it might just be you and you can sort it. So this is about building a contract, and I would suggest it is a written contract. Okay, if those are the questions that you've asked, what does success look like? What matters most to you? What do you most want to avoid? How would you like updates? And when do you want problems escalated? With those answers, the contract could be just, this is what I've heard from you, and I'm just going to pop that into an email and send it to you so that we've got this agreement between us. So you know what I'm working to, and we've got it there in writing, but also it's a great little checklist for me so I can make sure I use that as a filter for how, when, and why I'm going to come back to you. Now, can you imagine if somebody was sending this to you, having asked you these questions, how you would feel? The level of confidence would be so, so high because it's like, oh, okay, got a bit of a deal going on here. This person's got this. So that is how your stakeholder is going to feel if you do the very same. And this is all about kind of establishing the boundaries, establishing the baseline, if you like, of how this interaction is going to happen. And that is a very, very good confidence builder to get started. And then it's about understanding the working style, because even though that contract might be set, those terms of engagement, those terms of the relationship have already been set, in many ways, then the human bit cuts in. So this is where the working style needs to kind of, almost be a layer that you kind of place on top of this. So do you know whether then this senior stakeholder prefers a short verbal summary, a written note, a dashboard, a pre-read, or a quick recommendation with options? Because again, understanding the pace, the detail, the communication preferences, and then the decision style that's going to come from that. And they will have a decision style. Some people will go with gut feeling. They'll go with the intuition. You give them a little bit of a briefing, and they'll just, because maybe through experience or maybe level of confidence, or maybe just they're working in a specialist area that they just know really, really well, they'll just go for it. Other people might need a lot more evidence. So understanding from their perspective, their working style, not just in terms of the contract you formed, but also how this is going to play out in reality is really important. And of course, it's going to save you time and energy because then you're not trying to second guess how things will work out. You've actually got the deal in front of you. And of course, they've agreed to it because they've told you. So again, reflect on whether you know these answers or not. And if you don't, ask. People will more than gladly spend a few seconds answering these questions, and that is all you're asking for here. And maybe if they say, "Oh, look, I really don't have too much time right now," you say, "Okay, well, can we just go through this really quickly because it's going to save us both a lot of time, and I'll be able to deal back to you something that is going to be much more useful for you." They will say yes. I'll guarantee you that they will say yes because this is so valuable in terms of setting the baseline. And then it's about using a simple communication structure going forward. And this plays out with whatever the previous answers are to those earlier questions. HBR's Matt Abrams recommends, and he's done some reports on this. You can search this up if you want to go detailed into this. But there are some sort of packaging sort of philosophies, if you like, that messages need clear, concise, and logical structure to them to really, really land. Okay, so a simple communication structure could be what, so what, and now what. So think about this from a marketing example. The what is the campaign lead quality is down 18% per month. There's the fact. That's what. The so what is then that sales acceptance has fallen, so volume is hiding a quality problem. Okay. There's the context. The so what gives the context. So, as a senior stakeholder, I don't just want to know the what. Campaign lead quality is down by 18% per month. Right, problem. Then I'm starting to get a little bit restless. But the so what is, okay, but sales acceptance has fallen. So, volume itself is hiding a quality problem. Then what, as a senior stakeholder, do you want to hear from your person? You want to hear the now what. Okay, right, so what are we going to do about it? And this is where you then step in with the now what. And the now what is, in this particular example, we should narrow targeting, revise the offer, and review the landing page this week. Oh, and by the way, I'm onto it already. Can you imagine that landing if somebody said this to you, the what, the so what, and the now what, rather than just, oh, the numbers are down. Did you feel the tumbleweed just rolling past there at that moment? Because that is what happens. And how is that going to land versus the what, so what, and now what? You've just again layered on another piece of confidence in your senior stakeholder's mind. And they'll think, oh, you got this. Okay, great. Report back to me when you've done this. Let's see together, because that's how they're going to probably view this now. Let's see together what happens. So maybe then next week, if you can report back to me at the end of next week what happened from this idea, because yeah, well, I haven't got the time to kind of come up with a better idea than this. And actually it seems to make sense. So feels like you've got the confidence and you've got it. So yeah, just crack on is the very likely response to this very simple communication structure. So try it next time something plays out and it hasn't quite worked. Do the what, do the so what, and do the now what, and communicate it with your line manager, your boss, your customer, or somebody more senior, and see how that lands. Play with it. These are kind of tools and techniques that are so obvious when you stop and think about them, but we don't practice them. This is about building habits and practicing this kind of stuff. And when we do communicate this stuff back, it's always advisable to communicate it back in business language. Senior stakeholders very rarely care about marketing speak, if we're talking marketing here, or PR. They're not interested in channel detail unless it affects directly commercial outcomes, risk, timing, customer impact, or their strategic priorities. So more often than not, it really doesn't matter. So what happens here then? It means that you need to translate. You need to translate things like clicks into demand quality. You need to translate reach into relevant audience exposure. You need to translate engagement into signals of intent. You need to translate campaign performance into the commercial implications of what we're doing in our campaigns. Do you see what's happening here? It's very subtle, but it's not marketing speak. It's more business speak. So anytime you want to say something, think, how is this going to land with my senior stakeholder who is neither trained in nor interested in marketing? They don't really get marketing. So if I talk marketing, it's not going to land and they're going to say, oh, there's that marketer again talking marketing stuff. Anyway, I'm going to go and talk to somebody else. What you want this to do is to land in a language they understand. And again, I would admit here that I fail at this one often. This is one of the things that I'm personally working on because I do a lot of marketing speak, because I do a lot of marketing tuition, I do a lot of marketing lecturing, I do a lot of marketing writing. And so I talk a lot of marketing. And when I'm talking to senior stakeholders, clients, particularly in this instance, I find myself having to double take and think, they're not going to get this. I've just used a phrase that they should neither understand, neither need to understand, or actually, it's not going to actually impact on their decision making. So, Neil, turn this around and make this something that actually is meaningful to them. Talk their language. And so I'm doing it. You probably need to do it as well. It is one of the big failings of us as an industry. We often find ourselves expecting people to understand marketing, and very, very few people, even a lot of people in marketing, don't really understand it. So let's talk language of the business. That'll be a key way of actually getting your ideas to land properly. And by doing that, and actually really managing upward frustration from this kind of unclear communication, false assumptions, unclear ownership, or surprises that arrive too late, we can actually follow some getting in early, getting in quick, avoiding things landing or arriving on your senior stakeholder's desk or in their inbox before they've actually seen a possible solution playing out. Now, what I mean by this is that surprises can be avoided. You can preempt the stuff that might go wrong. You can develop in your campaign or your next piece of content or your next project or your overall marketing plan some contingencies of what you would do if this thing does not work out in the way that you hope. So raise the risks early. Start to show that you've got some plan B or maybe even a plan C if it's a big ticket item, so that you are managing this stuff and you're clarifying trade-offs. You're signaling this when timing, cost, scope, or performance maybe is going to shift, or you're preempting that this might not work out as we're planning it. And if you find that that's true, then let's get in early. Let's make sure that your senior stakeholders know that, yep, you've got this. So we've got plan A, and that's great. And if that works, brilliant. And you're going to talk to me about this plan A in a language you'll understand. You're going to manage it in a way such that you're going to report to me in, time in a timeline and through a style that I want as the person or the recipient of it. Great stuff. And if it doesn't work out, I can always see that you've already got another option. So I'm kind of almost as the senior stakeholder here listening to this, I'm enabling you and allowing you to manage my expectations and the risk profile that I've got. And suddenly that went down a few notches. It's like, yeah, you've got this. And it is, you've got this all the time that we seem to be coming back to, don't we? It seems to be that thing that it's enabling the confidence in the other person's mind that enables them to kind of really go with you and understand that, oh, you're a safe pair of hands. And so by doing it this way, you can then start to involve not just this one stakeholder, but any other stakeholders who might need to have their version of what we're talking about. So if what we're talking about here is your line manager, that's probably your starting point, or your customer if you're directly dealing with a client or customer. So understanding that number one priority stakeholder, great. So you've done it with them. But who else needs to support this? Have you got a sponsor? Is there a budget holder who's different to this first person? Who could block it? Is there anyone in the organization who could say, well, actually, no, this is not going to happen? It's the finance team, or maybe somebody more senior to the person who you've got as your key stakeholder. And who needs early involvement to get the early buy-in to this campaign, this project, or this new customer project? Whose priorities are affected. So it might not be somebody who's a tier one or even a tier two stakeholder here. This could be somebody deeper in the organization, somebody further away from you, but their priorities are affected by the outcome of what's going on here in these conversations. Find out who those people are and sort of try and figure out if you actually need to engage with them too. So this stakeholder map that I talked about before becomes ever more powerful, becomes really useful to be using because it isn't just this initial individual. You can play this out, obviously not at the same level of detail as that person, but you can play this out to people who can be quite distant to you in this relationship, but they still might be important in the overall program that you're running. And also, the same question is what matters to each of them? To each one of these people, what is it? Is it the final outcome? Is it the progress? Is it the timeline? Is it the resource? Is it the budget? Is it the fact that you're doing that project when you could be doing this one over here, which might suit them better? Understanding the answers to all of these useful questions is really, really key. And what you're doing is you're kind of attaching yourself and you're forming threads and bonds with a much broader range of humans across the organization or into your customers or into your clients. And this will become useful as you're building this stakeholder network in future projects as well. So it isn't just this one-off activity, because as long as these people are your stakeholders, those relationships are going to build. And maybe one of those stakeholders who is a little bit distant suddenly becomes right up close and personal with you because they've seen how you've done it. And then suddenly they want a little bit of the action with you as well. that could get interesting again, coming back to that whole thing about building your business or your career progression. So this works and people talk. We know people talk. Word of mouth is a huge thing. So the more you do of this, the more easy to work with you are, the more professional, the more confident people get in you, and the lower risk you are to be assigned some of the best projects. So it's important stuff. And so, if we can clarify the goal, if we can map the stakeholders, if we can understand their priorities, if we can tailor our messages to them, and if we can make the ask really, really clear, then what we're going to become is really, really influential. And this isn't about actually being stronger technically in what we're doing. This isn't about actually being the specialist in anything. This is about pure communication and actually having an active interest in other people, whether they are more senior or whether we become the senior person in this and we're actually managing people to do this for us. This is a two-way flow of information. It's a two-way flow of, well, upward influence, you could say, but it works in all forms of communication with our colleagues and with our customers. And a lot of this is going to play out really positively. It will. But a lot of the time, we find that the reality sort of steps in because we're not working in environments where there's an infinite amount of time or where there's, kind of resources that we can just call upon. Often there are pressures. There are people feeling anxious and stressed. Well-being in the world is not at its highest right now. There's a lot of chaos. And so we're managing in often quite disagreeable situations where people are feeling the stress and pressure. They're reacting in such a way that it isn't necessarily conducive to saying yes. And you don't have to say yes either. Managing upwards does not mean nodding enthusiastically while internally combusting, does it? Really, if you think about it, this whole way that we're positioning this is all about building two-way confidence. You've got confidence in your senior stakeholder that they are working in line with you and vice versa. And a lot of this works out well when you're actually acknowledging the combined goal. So you're working to a collective goal, you're pointing in the same direction. When you're stating any concerns clearly, so that if you don't feel you've got the right amount of resources, time, budget, or whatever, that you communicate that. You're not saying you're being disruptive. You're not saying I'm not supporting this project, but I'm just acknowledging that I've got some concerns over how this is going to play out. And I'm not being negative here by saying that. I'm just being realistic because, this is how it's feeling from my side. Can we talk about it? And if you can support those things with evidence and say, look, here's a previous project that was very similar to this one, and this is how it played out. So if we look at these three things, I think I can solve it with you. And then maybe offering an alternative or an option to the person. Saying no by just saying no or being disagreeable is going to get people's backs up. But saying no with an alternative or an option or some other choices, maybe reprioritizing, maybe showing a reality that your stakeholder isn't aware of, is the best way to build a really deep relationship. So it isn't about the no, it's about how the no comes through. So disagreeing well is key here and probably more important than doing things positively. So just because they're senior does not mean they want to hear yes all the time. They would much rather hear a no that is well managed than a yes that doesn't play out well. Think about that just for a moment. They would much rather hear a no that is well managed than a yes that doesn't play out well. And again, think about it from your perspective. If you're that person, wouldn't you rather know in advance that this thing is not going to play out well, or that there isn't the time or budget or resource available to actually do this in reality, and it's just a whim or it's just a wishful thinking? If you knew that, and then you said, okay, so give me another option. Oh, that's a better option. Okay, let's run with that. Thank you for doing that, is how you would respond. So why would somebody else not respond that way? Well, of course they would. So that's really, really key. And what this is going to do, it's going to set up opportunities to have meetings with your senior stakeholders. And these are going to become more and more regular as you become more and more useful. And in meetings, usefulness matters more than just the length of the meeting or the airtime you get with them. And a senior stakeholder, just by definition, is probably not going to be particularly time rich. So they're going to be time poor. So let's start from that perspective. So, if they are time poor, they are most likely to value colleagues like you who are prepared, concise, evidence led, and solution oriented. That is going to be more valuable to them. Right, let's get this done, is what they're going to say. So, if you can lead with the key point, if you can use evidence rather than some kind of scenic storytelling route, if you can state the implications of what's actually happening, recommend a next step. I'll say that one again. Recommend a next step and then be ready for any questions from them. Now, why did I emphasize recommend a next step? Because basically, your senior stakeholder wants you to make the decision. If you go to them looking for a decision and you present the evidence, maybe you give them two or three options and you say, guide me, you're more senior than me. I don't want to take accountability here. You get paid more than me. Guide me. They're going to go, right, okay, well, I haven't really got the time to do this, and then they're on the back foot. That is not a relationship that is going anywhere good anytime soon. So recommend a next step. You're the one with the detail. You're the one with the evidence. You're the one who should come prepared to this meeting. And if they then see, okay, you're recommending this next step and you're basing it on that, you've communicated it really clearly to me, you've led with the point that we're actually both working towards this goal. Okay, as senior stakeholder, I can't disagree with that. Okay, great, go for it. Oh, by the way, though, what would happen there? Okay, you've got evidence for that. Great. Okay, go for it. Report back when it's done, please. Can you see what's happening? It is so, so simple. It really is. But most of us don't do it this way. We go around the houses with our evidence. We stumble and fall when it's kind of, oh, this person's so senior. All they want is an easy time. Remember that. All they want is an easy time. So make it easy for them. If that 10-minute blubbering kind of meeting where you didn't actually guide them in any particular direction and you were waiting to be led reactively, if that can be shortened down to 60 seconds of really proactive stuff where you again have got this and that's all you're communicating to them because you've done your homework and then you just got the green light to go ahead and be ready for any questions that come through, just in case they are interested. They probably won't be. But if they are, then you get the green light and off you go. That is the win-win that we are looking for here. That is the win-win that, again, builds confidence on both sides. Imagine you in that position. You're going to be thinking, wow, this person is really, really good. Gosh, I was this good. And they will actually look at you in that way because that is how you're positioning yourself. And particularly if you then provide written confirmation. Remember that little written email that you did that was the contract or the deal that you struck with that particular stakeholder? We're making sure that you're following it up in written updates. Yes, you've done that verbal, quick little meeting. Follow it up. They're not going to read it, but you've got it banked on both sides of the relationship. You've got it, they've got it too. So you can always refer back to it and say, well, look, in that meeting back on when we spoke about this and it was a quick meeting, but look, I summarized it there and actually this was what we agreed. So now things have moved. So we've got a different implication here. They're going to think, whoa, this person is not only really technically quite skilled, they're really proactive. They're really passionate about how they do it. And remember, there's no specialist skills involved in this. This is just clear communication. And it's going to make them feel good. So, a strong update that follows up on these things, as you probably have these now quite regular meetings with these senior stakeholders, is going to include what's happened since the last time, what matters now, any risks or blockers that maybe have occurred since the last time, any clear, simple binary decision that is needed. I'll re-emphasize that, a simple binary decision that is needed from this update, and then recommended actions you're going to take. Back to that simple binary decision. Do not give multiple decisions to your senior stakeholders. By binary decisions, what I mean is it's A or it's B. You give somebody A, B, or C, they get bogged down in thinking. It's too hard a decision. Humans love binary. They like option A or option B. Remember the last time you went into a store? If you had option C and option D, how long did you spend in that store? ages. But if you had option A versus option B, it's simple. So do that here. The decision making is dead simple for your stakeholder if you give them option A and option B. You've already sold them into the fact that you've got either option anyway. So enabling them to make simple, straightforward option decisions is the key to you keeping control, you staying accountable, but actually having this senior stakeholder fully engaged with the fact that, okay, I'm here just being asked to give these decision points to somebody who is clearly in charge and has got this. I like this kind of responsibility because I'm now feeling confident that whatever happens, we're kind of in this together. This person's got my back. That is how they're going to be feeling. Really, really, really positive relationship building. And here's a marketing example. For instance, so we're in one of these kinds of projects, and it could be campaign underperformance. Now, a weak upward update to your senior stakeholder would sound like, oh, really, really sorry, engagement's a bit down, but we're looking into it. Can you imagine how that lands now when you know what the alternatives are? Engagement's a bit down. We're looking into it. Yeah, I'll come back to you. Not really sure what's going on. It's reactive, it's loose, it's not on contract or in the deal that you formed with that stakeholder. It's not answering their questions. And in fact, they are going to be not now sleeping at night very well because they'll be thinking, yeah, I trusted in this person. They're not giving me, I'm going to need to manage this. I need to step in. Do I want to step in? No, of course I don't want to step in. I've got all this other stuff to do. Ah, I really thought they had this. So that is going to be the response, and that's how that response sounds in your stakeholders' minds. That is how they're going to be thinking, and how are they feeling? Well, it's just undermined your relationship with them. So a stronger upward update sounds a lot more like, for the same scenario, this campaign underperformance. Well, lead volume is steady, but the qualified lead quality is down by 22%. Sales acceptance has slipped for 2 weeks. The likely causes are broader targeting and a weaker offer. So I recommend tightening the audience criteria and pushing one ad set today. Can I move this forward, please? Are you in agreement I take this one forward? So this reflects much clearer alignment with the business framed deal that you've already struck. It includes the what, it includes the so what, but it also includes the now what thinking. So what's going to happen there is they're going to say, all right, can you just take me through that again? So the lead volume's steady, but the qualified lead quality is down by 22%. Okay, so what I'm hearing there is that you've done the evidence, you've been looking at the analysis of what's happening. Great. So we're basing this on fact. Okay, I'm still with you then, is how they're feeling. Then sales acceptance has slipped for 2 weeks. Right. Well, okay, there's the commercial impact. There's the so what. So, right, now you've got my attention. The likely causes are broader targeting and a weaker offer. Okay, so we do need to do some tightening here, but I know you've probably got this because you said actually tightening the audience criteria. Okay, so we're going to focus this into particular audience category. Okay, and we're going to pause one ad set today. All right, so we're not going to spend quite so much budget until you've tightened this up. Great stuff. Yeah, crack on. Can you send me an update by the end of the day? Just tell me how it's gone. Brilliant. Yeah, just drop me a quick email. Can you see the difference in, and it's such a simple little example, but the difference in that versus engagement's a bit down, we're looking into it. I mean, I know I'm really kind of overemphasizing, the weakness of that earlier week update, but it is how so many people report. Imagine yourself on the other side just there for a moment. That is going to feel so uncomfortable. It's going to be so onerous. And it's a huge disappointment, really, isn't it? From everything you've promised up to this point, if you don't deliver that stronger update style using what, so what, now what thinking, then you've really fallen into a little hole that you didn't need to fall into. And there are some other holes that you could do, which is over explaining before making the point. Too much storytelling. Remember, your senior stakeholders have only got limited amount of time and attention. Assuming the alignment without checking. So keep checking back in with them as you're doing your updates, as you're sending your reports to them, or as you're having the meetings. Just kind of double check that, is this stuff still relevant to you? Am I giving you what you need? Is there anything else you want in these updates or in these meetings? Using marketing jargon instead of business meaning. So if you start to talk about, okay, well, this little thing went wrong here. Oh, but by the way, we can do blah, 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 and then you go off onto marketing speak, just because you're falling into that little hole again, they're just going to glaze over. So avoid that. Escalating too late, again, going outside of the deal that you or the contract that you've established, that can be an easy one. It's like, oh, I don't want to admit that we haven't actually got this right. Remember, the deal says they want to know at this point in the process. So tell them. You can tell them that you've got it, you're still working on it, that you're going to do a plan B. That's fine, but don't escalate too late. That can be something that gives a real downer feeling in your stakeholder's mind. Raising problems without options. We've covered this a number of times. It's so, so key. So key. Don't go to somebody with a problem. Go to them with a problem plus maybe two options of a solution that they can then decide upon. They're not looking to solve problems. You're the one who's going to solve the problem. You've got to take the problem and get the agreement that that is the route forward that they would agree with as well. Treating all senior stakeholders the same. We've covered this right at the back, but it's again when you're not time rich and you've got to kind of rush the reports out, it's like, oh, well, that'll do. If you ever find yourself using the phrase that'll do or just feeling it in your head or in your heart, it's time to just take a breath and think, no, each stakeholder, go back to my stakeholder map and give them what they need. You do it for a customer, so why don't you do it for your internal customers too? And mistaking silence for agreement. If you need to get a green light for something, if you need to get a quick little one-liner email, and that might be all it is, or a quick little WhatsApp message that says, yeah, proceed, get it. Okay, I'm working with one client at the moment now who uses WhatsApp to just give me the green light on stuff. And I wait, and there it comes. Boom. Yep. Noted. Go ahead. It is so good from my perspective working with this client because it's so quick from their perspective. They see the briefing that I've put through, and I get a little WhatsApp back that says, yep, crack on. Thanks, Neil. Brilliant. We don't have to get into a meeting. We don't have to do that. We do if they don't agree. So it gives them the option to just give the quick green light and we can all move on. But don't mistake silence for agreement. Don't say, oh, if I don't hear from you, I'm going to then carry on. That does not work. That is not part of your contract. Avoid that at all costs. So here we go then. Final little practical activity. Let's kind of do this in practice then, or you can then take this one forward now. So choose one senior stakeholder that you work with regularly and answer this question or this set of questions. And if you don't know the answer, talk to them. So if it's your line manager, for example, go and talk to them right now and say, what matters most to you? How much power and interest do you actually have? Now, you might not ask that question directly, but find out some questions that would enable you to answer that. What does success look like from their point of view? Commercial success, not your success. So it's from their perspective, through their lens. How do they prefer communication? And this is where you might have to step out of the comfort zone and you might have to communicate in a way that's not your preference, but it's all about them. They are your stakeholder, they are your customer. So how do they prefer communication? What do I need to update them on more clearly? There is a continuous improvement thing going on here. There's always a chance to update them more clearly, more slickly, in a better way. So continuous improvement by continually asking and then answering these questions is key. And the final one's interesting. Where do I need more courage, clarity, or consistency? And possibly the answer to that one is when you want to say no. Okay. But remember, it's not no, never. It's no with caveats. It's no with solutions. It's no with an opportunity to move forward in maybe a slightly different way, but it's evidence based. And that is what your stakeholder is looking for from you. They are not looking for you to become a yes person. Yes people are dangerous. Yes people are risky because you can tell instantly if they just say yes, they are not thinking about it. They're just taking this thing on and they're doing it whether or not they think about it or not. Somebody who comes back and challenges is a non-risk person because they are properly thinking it through, they're evaluating it, and they're looking for better options. Your senior stakeholder wants you to be a challenging person. Trust me, I've done this stuff for long enough to know that is the truth. Even though it feels like it's good to say yes all the time, often it's better to say no, but And that but is a positive but. So that will be something I would strongly, strongly recommend that you do from this point onwards with your senior stakeholders. Question every time you want to say yes, question if there is a no, but. And again, using those little models that we've talked about, the what, so what, and now what thinking to give really, really good positive options for going forward. So the key takeaways from all of this really is that managing upwards is not about saying yes, flattery or politics. It is about clarity. It's about expectation management. It's about influence by following some of these principles. And it's also about building the trust that comes from doing this stuff repeatedly and consistently. So the more you understand senior stakeholder priorities, the more you tailor your communication and raise issues with candor and structure, the more productive your relationships will become. And that is going to be good for you. It's going to be good for your work and your career progression, your customer relationship management, and it's usually good as well for the wider business.